Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and balance coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance. Hi, everybody. I am here today with Victoria English Martin. Victoria is an integrative nutrition coach, a fitness professional, a breast cancer survivor, and an advocate. She's also a certified Naked Mind coach and the host of the podcast After the Crisis. And Victoria is joining us today from Colorado. Hi, Victoria.
Hey, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Victoria is also my friend, full disclosure. We did the certification program together through This Naked Mind. And the reason why I wanted to have her on my podcast today, and I'm so excited to have you here, Victoria, is because Breast Cancer Awareness Month is October, and we're just getting this in under the wire. We're recording this on October 27th, but I wanted to do something in relation to breast cancer awareness, and Victoria is such an amazing advocate and just knows so much about this topic that I thought she'd be the perfect guest to have on today. So maybe, Victoria, let's start with that whole, the language that we use around breast cancer in October. You have a really interesting take on that. We call it Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And what's your take on that?
Thank you for the intro. And yes, I'm very happy to have you as my friend and fellow coach. Yeah, I have some pretty strong feelings about that Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I will say that I am happy that there is a month dedicated to raising awareness about breast cancer. But the question I have for you and your listeners is, on October 31st, or let's say when you wake up on November 1st, it's no longer Breast Cancer Awareness Month. What did you learn during the month of October? Did you learn anything about breast cancer? Or did you buy some pink products and support some companies that may or may not donate a lot of the proceeds to actual research and support for breast cancer patients and survivors? So I would love to have it be called Breast Cancer Education Month, because we are all aware that breast cancer exists. We unfortunately are very likely to know somebody who has experienced breast cancer. Uh, the statistics now are 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer during their lifetime. And the amount of education around breast cancer could really stand to improve. And so that's something I'm passionate about. There's things I wish I had known before my diagnosis that could have helped me. So part of what I do is to be an advocate and an educator about breast cancer.
Yeah, and I love that, Victoria. When I heard you say that, I thought that is like right on, because yeah, I haven't really learned much in all of the Octobers. And I've been, I've been doing the run for cancer,
Yes.
and my mom and I do have this. My mom, my sister, and I are part of this organization that bakes like a bajillion pies every year. We sell those and raise money for breast cancer. But in terms
That's
of the
great.
actual education around breast cancer, I'm not sure that I learn very much every October.
Mhm.
So I really like that view. And of course, every woman I know is aware of breast cancer. It really is
Yes.
about getting that education. So that's why I wanted to have you here today, because this podcast features ordinary, extraordinary women, and I consider you to be one of those. And I'm really happy to have you here. Would you do us the honor of sharing your story with us to start?
Yes. Yes, I'm happy to. Uh, well, I am I am 50 years old. I just turned 50, as you know, on the 14th of October. Very, very happy to celebrate that milestone and to have the gift of getting older, because I almost didn't. I almost didn't get older. Um, I have always been a very health-oriented person. I have my degree in dietetics. I studied exercise physiology. I have been a Pilates instructor and a nutritional consultant for many, many years. And uh, to be honest, I never really thought that I would get cancer. Um, I didn't have much of a family history. I had one aunt on my father's side who had it, but it wasn't very aggressive. I think she had a double mastectomy. I have a very, very large family on my father's side, and my mother was an only child. She passed away from a brain aneurysm 20 years ago. So I don't know if there was any sort of if she carried any sort of high risk, but I was always on top of my health. I started getting mammograms at the age of 40, which was suggested, and went every year and always had a clear scan. My last mammogram was in July of 2017. Everything was fine. Uh, what was it then? Maybe 8 months later or something like that, the end of March, I had just finished a workout on my Peloton bike. I hopped in the shower to clean up, and as I was washing myself, like I do every day, I felt this very distinct lump, and it was, if you think about the breast as a clock, it was right about 10 o'clock. So it was just where under the armpit, kind of where your bra cup goes. It was there, and I felt it, and I thought, I swear that wasn't there yesterday. What is that? And so I thought, did I hit myself? Did I, could this be some sort of a contusion or, but it just did not feel normal. And I knew something was not right. So I got into the doctor right away. That's one thing I will start by saying. If you feel something, please don't wait. Um, Thankfully, I did that. I went right to the doctor 4 days later. And it was just like just like everyone's worst dream, where they put you in the robe and the other women are coming and going, and they bring you in, and then you're waiting, and then they bring you back in to the room to do another mammogram, and then they bring you into the ultrasound room. And then the radiologist came in, and she was doing the ultrasound, and she saw the mass, and she looked at me and she said, "This is ugly. This is cancer." And she could see that there were some local lymph nodes that were also looking suspicious. And she said, it was just like you imagine. It was like I was looking through a pinhole. The room got very small and dark, and I couldn't believe what I had just heard. And she said, "Do you want to come back for a biopsy, or do you want to do it today?" And I said, "Please do it today." So they biopsied it. And a couple of days later, I got the call that yes, it is indeed cancer. And we have you set up to see the oncologist in 2 days. And it was a whirlwind. I went into the oncologist that Monday and uh, found out that it was something I had never heard of. And this is where the education part comes in. I had something called triple negative breast cancer, and I was stage 2B. There are stages to breast cancer. Stage 4 is where it has metastasized to other parts of the body. Stage 2B meant that it was of a significant size, and it had started to go up into some lymph nodes. It's also triple negative is also the very rare. It only affects 15 to 20% of breast cancer patients. And it is the most aggressive, fastest growing type of breast cancer. So there was literally not a minute to waste. And had I not found that lump where it was, thankfully it was in a place that was very palpable. I could feel it. But had it been more embedded in deeper in my breast or something and I had missed it, there's a good chance that I wouldn't have made it in time, that it would have been stage 4 by the time they found it. And that's a scary thought. So it was a it was a blur. They said, you've got to start chemo right away. Uh, Triple negative, you don't have the luxury of time. There's no talk of let's try some other, more holistic approaches. Let's try this or that. It's because there's no time. It's growing that quickly. So I was diagnosed on, I believe it was like April 2nd or 3rd. I started chemotherapy about 2.5 weeks later. I had 16 rounds of chemotherapy. Um, I had a double mastectomy, a full hysterectomy, 28 rounds of radiation, and then 6 months of oral chemotherapy. During that time, I developed sepsis at one point, and I was in the hospital for 10 days. I developed cellulitis in my right breast another time and was hospitalized for about 3 or 4 days. It was it was very, very difficult, to say the least. It's hard even now to talk about it, and it's hard to believe that I went through that. And what I would like people to understand is it is scary to get a mammogram. It is scary to do your self exams because you might find something. But if you can save yourself from going through the absolute hell of cancer treatment, I promise you that the fear that you're imagining, the fear that you are feeling, which is real, and the stories that you may tell yourself of what could happen, it's going to be a lot less scary than the actual diagnosis and having to go through it. So, a lot of us, especially during COVID, it's been more difficult for us to get our normal exams and things like that. And it's easy with everything going on to say, well, I'll just push back my mammogram. Please don't push back your mammogram. Please insist on getting that done. If you're listening to this, I will send Wendy a link on how to do your self exams, how to really do them so that you are feeling the entire breast area, what to look for, changes in the nipple, changes in the skin, anything like that. So triple negative breast cancer is, like I said, it is rare and extremely aggressive. There's other types of breast cancers, and I never knew this. Talk about education, right? Who knew that there were different types of breast cancer? There are other types of breast cancer which are hormone positive. And what that means is they are driven in part by estrogen and progesterone and things like that. So those are more common. They are often slower growing, and there's no good kind of cancer to get, but most cancers don't require as much treatment as I had. So you know it's still very scary, but it's more likely to be curable. You also have a lower risk of recurrence with hormone positive breast cancer, that you can take medications after treatment, tamoxifen and other things, that will reduce your risk of recurrence to virtually nothing, like 5%. Now, tamoxifen and those other medications come with side effects, and you may not be who you were before cancer, but you can go on to have a long and healthy life. Triple negative breast cancer is the thing with, one thing I missed about the hormone positive is the recurrence risk is lower, but it also has a risk of recurring later in life. So, maybe 15 years later or something like that, it can come back. Triple negative is a strange beast because once you finish treatment, the recurrence risk, this is not the most updated data, and hopefully these numbers are being reduced with more research and more aggressive treatments and things like that. But the current data indicates that the recurrence risk with triple negative breast cancer is somewhere between 20 to 30% within the first 5 years after treatment. Some people start from the date of diagnosis. Some people date from the time of mastectomy when you're declared no evidence of disease, meaning they think they've gotten all of the cancer, which was the case for me. Um, so I try not to focus too much on dates, but this week marks 2 years since my double mastectomy. So I'm happy about that. The weird thing about triple negative is once you get out of that 5-year scary recurrence window, um, your risk of recurrence actually goes down to the same risk as someone who never had breast cancer. Now, that's not to say it doesn't come back sometimes later, but it's really strange. So a lot of people, once they are out of that 5-year window, they kind of feel like, okay, I made it. I'm going to be all right. Um, so a lot of the way you live your life after treatment depends on just a healthy mindset. I like to look at it as, I have a 20 to 30% chance of recurrence. Okay, that also means that I have a 70 to 80% chance of not having a recurrence. So I try to focus on that part. And of course, lifestyle and things can help. They don't know how much, they can't really measure it, but things like regular exercise. You know, um, I work with a naturopath. I'm part of a clinical trial. I do a lot of things to do anything I can to make that risk as low as possible. So that's how I live my life. But yeah, those are some things that I certainly didn't know before my diagnosis. This is all information I wish I didn't know. But since I have walked this road, I feel my duty is to be a voice for others and be an educator for others, so that number one, I can help validate their fear that yes, it is scary to get a mammogram. Yes, it is scary to feel your breasts each month. And that fear of finding something, yes, those are real fears. But as women, we're just beginning in this generation to find our voice. And part of finding our voice requires advocating for our health and taking care of our health and looking out for other women and helping them.
Yeah, really well said, Victoria. And thank you so
Thank you.
much for sharing that. I do think the best way to learn is from other people's experiences. And I really appreciate you sharing that really personal story with us. I know
Mhm.
when I heard it the first time, um, and I just heard that story actually a couple months ago during COVID. And what I had exactly the reaction that you're hoping women have. If that helps, I had the reaction of, oh, I need to get another mammogram. I can't put this
Yes,
off because of COVID. Um,
right.
and so, it had an immediate impact on me. And I know for the women that listen to this podcast
Mhm.
today, it's going to have an impact on them as well. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
You found out at some point that you carry the BRCA1 gene, right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
How did that come about? Because you didn't have that history that you were aware of in
Exactly.
your family.
Yes. Well, since I'm not sure if they run genetic testing on every woman who is diagnosed, but there is a link, they think, between the BRCA1 or 2 mutation and triple negative breast cancer. For some reason, people who carry that mutation tend to show up with the triple negative. And since I was still young, I was 48 at the time of diagnosis, I think 47, 48, lost track. Um, since I was still relatively young, they said, this is worth having the genetic testing done. Hopefully someday BRCA testing will be standard. But right now, without a family history, it's very difficult and expensive to get that test. And it's also a scary test to get. if
Sure.
you have a family history. So they did the test on me. It came back that I do carry the BRCA1 mutation. What that means is that I was born with about a 75% chance of getting breast cancer. And I never knew that. I would have never dreamed that. Now, with that education, if someone has a family history, you can oftentimes get that testing covered by insurance. And even if it isn't, if it's at all possible to pay for it, it really is worth it because you can spare yourself what I went through, and you can do a preemptive mastectomy. If you're finished having children, you can have the hysterectomy. But again, it doesn't always have to be that radical. Sometimes they'll just do very close monitoring of you, meaning more frequent ultrasounds. Instead of just getting a mammogram, you'll also get an ultrasound watching your uterus and your ovaries and things like that, because there's a link also with ovarian cancer.
Right.
So, yeah, that's the thing with BRCA. It turns out my mother has passed, so obviously we don't know if she carried the BRCA1 gene, but or mutation, I should say. But it turns out that I carry it from my father's side, because my father got tested and he carries it. So I got it from him. Unfortunately, my only remaining aunt, who is in her early 70s, was just diagnosed a couple of months ago with triple negative breast cancer. She carries the BRCA1 gene and she is undergoing chemotherapy. Uh, Now, that's terrifying. However, the way I look at it is I have 3 daughters and 1 son. The way I look at it is my suffering at least has given us all the awareness that we can be tested. My daughters can be tested. My son can be tested because it also increases, not significantly, but does increase the risk of prostate cancer in men. So, so that's the thing with the BRCA. And is that something that I worry about? Yes, because I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 25, getting engaged next month. She has her whole life ahead of her. But her doctors are aware, and she does her breast exams and things like that. So we haven't had them tested yet. We will. But at least they know. At least
Yeah.
they know.
Yeah, there's that knowledge is power piece there.
Yes.
Even though it's terrifying to do the test, um, you're now in a position where you have the information, so you can.
Mhm. Make informed decisions,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So Victoria, I do not know very much about this. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today, because this is not
Mhm.
something that I can speak to a lot of things, but this is not something I can speak to.
Yes.
And I have some questions for you. Just I've had been surrounded by a lot of cancer in my life, but just for whatever reason, not a lot of breast cancer. And so I don't know very much about this particular type of cancer.
Mhm.
I had some questions around um, one of the things that I hear from people all the time, and I know that with my close family members who have had cancer, I've had people have kind of expressed this to me. I don't know what to do. What can I do to help this person? And I think you're like the absolute best person to give us some really helpful suggestions as to what you can do when somebody you love is going through what you went through. Like what can
Yes.
you do that's actually helpful and that actually might make their day just a tiny bit easier or
Mhm.
better or whatever. Like were there things that people did when you were sick that really stood out, that you really appreciated? Do you have any suggestions around that?
Yes. Yes, and that's such a thoughtful question. I'm so glad you asked it, because it's a question a lot of people are afraid to ask. So you get a lot of the blanket, let me know if I can do anything. Well,
Right.
I was so sick of talking about my health and telling people how miserable this was. And I was exhausted. So to be honest, it's hard for us when we're going through it to really be able to name what we need.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was extremely lucky. We were a first year family at my daughter's school. She was in fifth grade at the time. She was in fourth grade when I was diagnosed, and then treatment went on through fifth grade. And even I just had a surgery less than a month ago. I've had 10 surgeries since I was diagnosed. So this has been a long time. And we were first year family. We had moved from Miami to Denver.
Can you
And
explain,
the
sorry, only for the Canadians listening? I don't know what that is. What's a first year family?
oh, it just means that we were new to the school.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, sorry about
Yeah.
that. Yes, we were new to the school. So I hadn't really made a lot of really close friends or anything yet, but these parents were proactive. They set up a schedule, a meal train. So for example, and caring for my daughter because my husband traveled a lot. And we had a schedule where on Thursday I would have my treatment. I would feel okay. I would be okay on Friday. By Saturday, I was done for. In the bed, sick. That's when the chemo really was kicking in. So my husband would usually travel and come home on Friday so that he could be on duty with our daughter all weekend. But every Friday, we had a meal delivered for I couldn't eat very much, but for my children, for my husband and daughter. And that was just amazing. We also, since I had chemo during the summer and Aubrey wasn't in school, my daughter, they set up a schedule of play dates. So every Friday I could rest and Aubrey had something fun to do. And then of course daddy would come home that afternoon and and be with her the whole weekend. So that was huge. I would say see if their weeds need to be pulled. See if they have things that need to get shipped out and you can go to the UPS or whatever, the post office, and send some things out that they need taken care of. Do they need winter's coming? Do they need someone to winterize their sprinkler system? Anything. Think about yourself. If you couldn't really do your daily tasks, do one of those for that sick person. It can be as small, like I said, getting their mail, sorting out the junk mail. I had piles of junk mail because I was too tired to go through the mail. So anything, and it means so much to us. Um, you know, uh, we love our lotions and oils and things like that. Those were helpful for me. But I had so much of it, and I've since given some of it to other patients because not everyone is as lucky as I was. I had such support. Um, Find people maybe who don't have that kind of support. If you want to do a good deed, drop something off at your local treatment center. See what I don't know what you can do during COVID, obviously, but just think of something that they might need, something you might need if you were really sick. Like if you've had the flu, what could a friend do for you? And do that.
That's great advice. Just like think about the regular everyday tasks and chores that need to be done, and just imagine having to try to do that on top of everything you're doing. So
Exactly.
I love
Mhm.
that, like walking their dog, or you know,
Yes.
doing the
Oh,
groceries, or yeah, yeah,
walking the dog. If you're at the grocery store, send them a text. Hey, I'm at the store. Do you need milk? Do you need bread? Do you need anything?
yeah.
It means
No,
so
that's
much. It
great.
means so
Thank you for that. That's
much.
really helpful. I think that's one thing that I know I personally have struggled with over the years. You want to do something that's actually really helpful for the person, and not
Mhm.
just kind of send the token flowers or
Yes.
lotions, I guess.
And
Um,
those are lovely. Listen, I
they are,
appreciate
yes,
every single one of them,
yeah,
but just having some of those simple
yeah,
things taken care of
yeah.
were
That's,
really important.
that's great advice. What do you wish? What do you know now about breast cancer? Breast cancer, just generally in terms of having increased your education and your knowledge around breast cancer. What do you know now that you wish you had known earlier, that you would like to share with other women?
I have some very strong feelings about this. Um,
Fire away. You're allowed to have strong feelings. If anyone
Yes,
doesn't have strong feelings about this, it's you. So go for
yes. So, in on my social media, I am part of several support groups, triple negative breast cancer support groups. And it's so hard to say this, but I've seen women pass away in these groups. And often it was because they felt something in their breast and they went to maybe their general practitioner and said, I feel something. And the doctor would say, well, you're pregnant, or your cycle, you're menstruating, or it's normal to have fluctuations and feel things, especially if you have dense breast tissue, which I did have. They'll say it's normal to feel some changes, maybe a little lump that wasn't there, and why don't you keep an eye on it? And if it's still there in 6 months, then let's go see about it.
Right.
Well, guess what? With triple negative, if you give that 6 months, by the time you go back because you still feel it or it's changed, they do the PET scan and you light up like a Christmas tree because it has metastasized. So I have seen women who listen to that advice come back in 6 months. I have seen pregnant women going through chemo. I've seen, sorry, I saw a woman who had an 11-week-old baby asking for donations of breast milk because she had days to live. I will never forget that woman. And it happens, and it doesn't need to happen. So she now left an infant and a 2-year-old behind, and a husband. And if they would have listened to her and not said, it's your hormones because you're pregnant, she might still be here.
Yeah, it's so tragic when you hear stories like that, and
It's so tragic,
it's
and it doesn't have to
it,
happen.
no, it doesn't. And I think I mean, all we can do as women is really try to trust that intuition, trust that knowing, trust your
Yeah.
gut, whatever you call it, trust it, and then advocate for yourself.
Advocate for yourself.
Advocate, yeah,
Fight for yourself the way you would fight for your best friend,
yeah,
the way you would fight for your daughter, the way you would fight for your sister.
yeah,
Be that person. Let them roll their eyes at you. Let them think that you're annoying. Who cares?
yeah,
This is your life. So if they tell you come back in a few months if it changes or you still feel it, don't leave that office without an appointment for a mammogram and an ultrasound.
yeah,
That is my probably biggest piece of advice,
yeah.
because I hate seeing what has happened to so many women, and it didn't have to happen.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question about you touched on the dense breast dense
Dense
breast
breast
tissue?
tissue.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm personally curious about because I think I probably have dense breasts. No
Mhm.
one's ever told me that, but that's my that's what
Yes,
I have self-diagnosed dense breast tissue. And my question is, was that when you felt the lump, did it feel different to you than yeah
it did,
yeah
but it also but again, it had grown to a significant enough size.
right yeah
They did go back and look at my mammogram that I had had just months prior. They re-examined it, and there was nothing there that they could see. So now I believe it's in 31 of the states down here in the good old USA. I love my country, but Lord, you Canadians must be thinking, what the hell is going on down there? I love my
no
country.
comment
Woo!
no comment
No
Victoria.
comment. I know, I know. Um, but in 31 states, it is now there has been a bill passed that if you have dense breast tissue, you are entitled to an ultrasound as well as a mammogram. So I didn't know that. I don't think it had been passed yet, but I did have dense breast tissue. And if I had known, at least maybe I would have gotten the ultrasound. Maybe there would have been something on the ultrasound. So if you do have dense breast tissue, talk to your doctor when you get your mammogram and say, I would like an ultrasound. And often, again, you can fight with your insurance company and you may have to do that to get it covered, but it's worth the fight. Again, it's about raising your voice and advocating for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Mhm.
true. So listen, we would be remiss, the two of us, if we did not talk about one thing on this podcast, because both of us are alcohol-free life coaches now, certified with
Yes.
the Naked Mind, and we both have very strong feelings on one of the risk factors in relation to cancer and breast cancer in particular that we want to talk about today, and that is the link between breast cancer and alcohol, which is hardly ever discussed, but which is actually a very big link and a very significant risk factor. And so I would love it if you would talk a little bit about that for everybody who's listening who is not aware
Yes.
of the link.
Right, absolutely. Well, just to demonstrate how unaware people are, we've seen in the month of October pink bottles of wine, donating money to research. I mean, you talk about backwards.
Yeah, not just
Yes,
not just one company either. I mean, I want to
oh
say,
no,
like, our friend Emily Lynn Paulson, who was a guest on my podcast, I think my second podcast, does a great job of tracking and calling people out on
she
this stuff.
does.
And she is a warrior when it comes to this stuff. And
Yes,
she's been posting all through the month of October just tons and tons of images of companies that
yes.
are, it's called pink washing, right?
Pink washing,
Yeah.
yes. So this is no longer speculation. This is fact that drinking just three alcoholic drinks per week, which with my history, I never saw the point in three alcoholic drinks a week. I drank excessively. Um, it indicates that it raises your risk of breast cancer by 15%.
15%, you guys, 15% increase in risk of developing breast cancer if you drink just 3 alcoholic drinks a week. What's an alcoholic drink?
An alcoholic drink is a 12-ounce can of beer. It is, I think, 4 or 4.5 ounces of wine. It is, I believe, an ounce of hard liquor. So, if you go out and you're having cocktails with your girlfriends,
Yeah,
and
or not the 4 ounce glass of wine. I'll tell you, I
it's
don't
not
think
a
I ever
4 ounce
drank
glass
4
of
ounces
wine,
of wine.
right? Right. If you look at what 4 ounces of wine actually looks like, you will be shocked.
Yeah, it's like a baby glass.
It's a baby glass,
Mhm.
right? And you see the marketing of the big glasses and everything else, and yeah. So
It's
just
shocking to me because when I look at the other risks, and again, I'm not an expert at all in this area, but just looking at the risk factors out there for breast cancer, just did a little research before we were talking, and
Mhm.
most of the risk factors are just completely outside of our control for the most part.
Yes,
So, they're
yes.
things like, your increasing age, a personal history of breast cancer, early menstruation, late menopause,
Mhm.
having your first pregnancy after 30 or not having had a prior pregnancy,
Right.
the use of oral contraceptives. I mean, a lot of, like, most of those are pretty hard for us to avoid as women.
Yes.
And then, the list goes on. And then at the very bottom, usually, of the lists that I looked at was alcohol use. But
Yes.
it just seems like, I don't know the statistical connection in terms of those other risk factors to breast cancer, but 15% is a huge
15%.
risk.
Exactly. So, for example, the link that they suspect, well, which is proven now, is that it changes your estrogen levels,
Right.
alcohol consumption.
It
So
increases your estrogen, right?
yes, it
Yeah.
increases your estrogen. So, okay, I had non-hormone related breast cancer. So I said to my doctor, well, did my drinking have anything to do with this? Because it's not hormone related. So does that apply to me? And he said, not necessarily, but drinking also can damage your DNA, your cellular DNA. it lowers your immune function. Just those 3 drinks a week. So, did my drinking contribute to my breast cancer? Maybe, maybe not, but it didn't help.
Yeah.
So just because I had non-hormone dependent doesn't mean that I did myself any favors. And yes, I was a very heavy drinker, but it just shows how little it takes to raise that risk, because even those 3 drinks a week can lower your immune function, can cause that cellular damage that may leave you susceptible. And then, of course, we're talking about the other, 75 to 80% of breast cancers, which are hormone dependent. So you have a real opportunity to lower your risk by not drinking.
Yeah, this is really meant to be an empowering message, not a scary message, which is what I try to do with everything in my podcast.
Yes.
It's just this is something that you actually do have some control and power over when it comes to breast cancer. And for so many of us, it's terrifying. The statistics, just what you said at the beginning, 1 out of 8 of us.
Yes.
So and we all have friends and family members who have had breast cancer. And
Yeah.
so, we're all afraid of it, I think. And so whenever there's something that's actually within our control,
Yes.
I feel like it's my duty to, flag it for
Yes.
people. And,
Yeah.
for reasons that you and I could talk about for days, probably,
Yes.
this is
So we
not
have.
something we do not talk about this publicly. It's not
No.
something, and I am pleased to see that it is starting to become more mainstream. It's the facts around this and the connections between alcohol and breast cancer and also other diseases are, and
Mhm.
just generally the dangers around alcohol are starting to be talked about in a more open way now. And I know the
Yes.
American Cancer Society and the Canadian Cancer Society have started to actually make some pretty bold, big statements
Some
around the
very bold
connection between, which
statements.
is great. It's long overdue. So that is happening.
Yes.
We don't talk about alcohol very much because it's such a complicated societal problem, as you
Yes,
and I
of
both know,
course.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, so Victoria, on that note of alcohol, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing your story with alcohol around this diagnosis. And the reason I'm asking this question is because I feel like you probably have some really great advice for,
Mhm.
there most of us drink. Those are the statistics, right?
Yes.
87% or something of North Americans
Yes.
drink. So most of us drink alcohol. And so, most women who get diagnosed with breast cancer are drinking alcohol. And I wonder, if you'd be comfortable sharing that part of your story,
Mhm.
and any advice or suggestions or,
Mhm.
positive words that you might have around that for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I was a quote normal drinker growing up. I went to a big football school. I was in a sorority. Went to a lot of parties and drank like a lot of college kids. Never really suffered any consequences other than the bad hangover here and there. But that was just part of the rite of passage at that time, right? And then I got married after college, had 3 children within 4 years, and really was not much of a drinker at all during my 20s. I was busy with my children. Uh, my husband and I would sometimes open a bottle of wine and have a couple of glasses, and there would be this much left in the bottle. It would go to waste or get consumed another day or something like that. So there was alcoholism in my family, so I was aware of what it could look like, but really didn't give it much of a thought since it was not really a big deal in my life. My mom, as I mentioned previously, passed away 20 years ago. It's coming up on 21 years in November. So she passed away suddenly from a brain aneurysm. She was on life support for a week. So she had the aneurysm. I was up with her for a week. I was with her when she passed. There was a lot of trauma around her death and our relationship and things, like a lot of us, very complicated relationship with my mother. And when she passed, I didn't get any closure to a lot of the questions I had, and just was left feeling that I just wasn't enough. Things like that, right? A lot of stuff that we carry around. And on the flight home, I got absolutely plastered. And that was the beginning of my shift in what I say, from drinking, consuming alcohol to using alcohol as self-medication.
Yeah, and this, I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 sec because I think this is really important, Victoria. In fact, just today I was coaching in a live group around alcohol, and someone asked this question, like, why is it that some people can take it or leave it, and other people get, go down this kind of slippery
Yes.
slope with it? And my answer was exactly what you just said, which is that really, first of all, it's an addictive substance, and if anybody
Mhm.
uses it enough for long enough, they're going to get addicted to it, and they're going to go down the slippery slope. But
Yes.
really the distinguishing factor often for us is whether or not we reach for it at a certain point in time. We start reaching
Yes.
for it for a different reason, and that switch flips where we're no longer using it just as something to, for fun or whatever.
Have with
So,
dinner or
yeah, like a
yeah,
social, the switch flips because now we're using it to actually medicate, cope, escape, deal with something, which is what happened with you there. The switch
absolutely.
flipped for you. That's a great example of that.
Yes, that is exactly what happened with me, and that's why, as you know, Wendy, my niche with this Naked Mind coaching is working with people who can trace their drinking issue back to a specific time where, because I remember clear as day because I was vomiting out of a cab. And so that was something happened. I started developing anxiety. I was a runner, and all of a sudden, after my mom died, I couldn't catch my breath. And it was 1999. There wasn't a lot of awareness about what this was. Why did I feel like I had a vice around my chest? Well, I was anxious.
Right.
And guess what worked at the end of the day?
Yeah.
A couple of glasses of wine. So I had 3 young children. Suddenly I found myself just kind of reaching for that bottle because that feeling of the first drink or two, just but as you know, it is an addictive substance. So suddenly the 2 glasses wasn't working the way it used to. So it slowly went to 3. This was a very slow descent for me. So it's not like some people that, like you said, where they pick up that first drink at 16 and they're off to the races and they're, full blown into addiction. Mine was very slow. I went back and forth between having periods of not drinking and then going back to it whenever another crisis would happen.
Right.
I went through a divorce. I got remarried. I had another child. I had 3 teenagers at the same time.
Yeah.
You know,
And
talk about
what point did the breast cancer diagnosis come in all of this? Were you drinking when
well,
you got the diagnosis still, or?
no, I had been alcohol free for several months. Again, not in a real free, happy way, kind of just doing it because I knew I had to, because it was creating problems in my life. It was creating problems in my relationships, problems in how I felt about myself. I wasn't living in accordance with my values. I was not showing up as the best version of myself. So I'd been struggling and trying all different ways to stay off of it. Uh, and what's crazy is when I was diagnosed, I remember thinking, well, gosh, I will never drink again, ever, ever. I am in the fight for my life. There is no way alcohol will ever enter my mind again. So imagine my shock and surprise when, after all of this treatment, all this hell that I went through, and just like a lot of us women, we when a crisis comes, we can narrow our focus, put our heads down and barrel through, right? That's what we do. We don't break down. We get through it. And that's what I did. I was the star cancer patient. And then I had expectations of what life would be like after treatment. I had expectations of how healthy I would feel, of getting back my vitality and feeling healthy and happy and grateful to be alive. I felt like crap. My body was left ravaged. I had chronic pain. I couldn't sleep. I was depressed. The reality of what I had just been through started to hit me. I was terrified of the risk of recurrence. And alcohol had become my default during these years. So whenever those feelings would come, my brain said, "We're scared. We have to protect you. Let's drink." So I had a brief period of time uh, after treatment where I went back to drinking, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
Nobody knew. I was completely ashamed. Only my oncologist knew, and he was about to just lose his mind. you know, um, and I was so ashamed. And now I'm not ashamed because now I understand why. My brain was not trying to kill me. My brain was trying to save me. It said, "This is what we do when we're terrified. This is what we do." So I have to share my story because I can hopefully, somebody listening to my story will say, "Me too. You mean it's not my fault? You mean I'm not a bad mother or wife or sister or daughter or employee or employer? Or you mean my brain actually thinks it's helping me? Oh, okay."
Yeah, and you can't, and this is something I say all the time too, like, and I know that you feel strongly about this too. You cannot reasonably expect yourself to let go of a coping mechanism that isn't serving you if you don't have a healthy coping mechanism to replace it with. And that's the piece that
Absolutely.
it's missing so often when people try to make habit change, whether it's around alcohol or some other
Mhm.
habit. If they
Absolutely.
if they don't fill that, if they don't fill that void that's been left from the thing that's been
Yes.
like their thing, their coping mechanism, it's gotten them through all of these tough
They're
times.
blanky.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
it was, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You're,
Yes.
you're just human. You can't, humans can't do that. We need to
No,
build a healthy coping toolkit, and I know that you have done that, and I
I
know that
have.
that's a big piece of your being so happily alcohol free now.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It took a lot of courage and a lot of work. Uh, I think you've heard me say this before. My team that helped me kind of get better uh, said, you've been putting pretty flowers around your trauma tree. It's time to go in with a backhoe and pull it up by the roots and look at these things, and then over time, and of course with the help of this Naked Mind book, um, I found a freedom, and I found ways now that number one, I learned healthier ways to deal with these feelings. I learned to tolerate these feelings. I learned that feelings will not kill me, uh, and learned to show myself some compassion and grace. And again, this Naked Mind was such an eye-opening book for me, that when became an integrative nutritionist, I said, unless I can coach around this alcohol piece, if alcohol is a contributing factor to some of the issues going on in people's lives, I can't serve my clients as well as I possibly can. So that was my impetus to stalk Annie Grace and find out about her upcoming coaching program, and go through this wonderful training, which of course we went through together, and has been
Yeah.
so changing.
I know I feel like sometimes it sounds like a bit of a cult maybe on this podcast because we're always talking about this naked mind, but that's because that's my community and because I
Yeah.
strongly believe in that methodology and because it's just changed hundreds of thousands of lives and it changed my life and it changed your life. And so
And
we're
we're
going to
just
talk
getting
about it.
started.
we,
We're just getting
yeah,
started.
we can't not talk about it. So,
It's so exciting. Yes.
Victoria, you are you're just so strong. And I so appreciate what you're doing. And
Thank
the
you.
fact that you are willing to come on a podcast like this and talk about your story and share all of these intimate details with the hope that you will, you know, be able to prevent someone else from having to go through this is just so incredible. I
Thank you.
thank you so much. I have learned so much on this podcast, and I know that everybody who's listening has learned something as well. What I'm going to do, Victoria, is I'm going to get that the link from you for the self exams, and I'll
Yes.
post that on when this podcast posts on my blog. The link will
Yes.
be there on my blog and in the show notes, so it will be available to anybody who wants to get more information on that. And
Yes.
I know where you are, but how can people find you if they want to find out more about you or your podcast,
Yes,
After the Crisis?
absolutely. Thank you. You can find me at victoriaenglishmartin wendyMcCallum.com. You can also look up After the Crisis, and you'll find me that way, afterthecrisis.com. My podcast is called After the Crisis.
There's a theme here.
Yeah, there's a theme here. And that's where you can find me. And of course, on the This Naked Mind website under Certified Coaches, you'll find me there. My fun fact on there is that since I lived in Miami, I know how to curse in Spanish. So if you contact me, I'll teach you a few curse words, say under your breath, and no one will know that you're cursing.
That's a little coaching bonus that I can't.
Coaching bonus, yes. So anyway,
that's
yes,
great. Thank you so much, Victoria. I really, really appreciate you giving me the time today to share all of this really important information with us.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Wendy.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. To be sure you don't miss any upcoming bite-sized conversations, subscribe now to this podcast. For more balance and wellness tips or to connect with me, visit my website at wendymccallum.com. That's WENDYMCCALLUM.com.